I know what Caleb Calhoun thinks. He thinks that Nico Iamaleava will be a Heisman contender in year number one. Caleb's gone so far to predict that Tennessee can win the national championship this upcoming season in 2024. So first, let me ask you, with Nico, why do you think he could truly be a Heisman contender in year number one? That's asking a lot. Please hit like and subscribe. We appreciate that. Brought to you by Rick Terry Jewelry Design. And all you got to do is go to rickterryjewelry.com, rickterryjewelry.com. Absolutely the best. And they got those fire opals for game day as well. So check them out. Caleb, why do you think that Nico can be a Heisman contender from day one?
Well, that's very, very simple. Nico Iamaleava, as I've told you guys plenty of times before, is the quarterback that Josh Heupel, if he could create in a lab to run his system, that lab would produce Nico Iamaleava. And I've said it before, the same way the lab produced Tim Tebow for Urban Meyer, and the lab produced Tommy Frazier for Tom Osborne, and the lab produced Danny Warfel for Steve Spurrier. Although you think any quarterback could have run you think Danny Warfel was a dime a dozen for Steve Spurrier's system.
Oh, no. I never said that. No, I think he was really, really, really gutsy. I just physically, athletically, he was a dime a dozen.
Okay.
I think it takes a lot of guts to stand in there. That was my favorite quarterback of all time, Troy Aikman's best trade.
No, that's true. So Nico Iamaleava, well, he took it to a fault, but that's a different story. But Nico Iamaleava,
you can't remember how to tie his shoes, but other than that,
yeah. So he's created in a lab. He has also already been in this system for a year. It's not like he has to learn. There's this whole thing of Nico has to learn the offense. Why? He's been in it for a year. I don't buy this whole you got to learn the offense thing. If you've been, even if you're a backup, if you've been in the system for a while, you know the offense. So the only thing you would have to say is like, will in-game action, and that has more to do with your mentality, I think, than anything else. I think actual starting experience can, to a certain degree, be overrated, particularly if you are the perfect fit for the offense. Tim Tebow won the Heisman his first year starting for Florida. I mean, Cam Newton won a national championship his only year starting for Auburn. Jameis Winston won the Heisman and a national championship, as did Johnny Manziel winning the Heisman. Cam Newton, Jameis Winston, and Johnny Manziel were all first-year starters the year they won the Heisman, as was Tim Tebow. I don't see why Nico Iamaleava can't have the same thing when he's already worked in this offense for a year, and he's got all the tools, and he's got all the talent, and he has more experience in this offense now than Hendon Hooker did when Hendon Hooker first became a starter in 2021, and that is one of the top 5 most efficient passing seasons in Tennessee football history, surpassed by Hendon Hooker in 2022. So why couldn't Nico Iamaleava be as great as possible in his first year starting?
Elias says day one. No, I'm not being literal day one. Sorry, misspoke there. Elias also says some minority of sports writers and announcers are going to like him, and they're going to love to hype him after the NC State and OU games. There will also be, and I've talked to several Heisman voters. For those new to the program, I am a Heisman voter. There are a lot of us. And there are some that believe there will be backlash against the old school journalists that don't think players should get paid, that he embodies NIL. Could that actually work against him in some sports writers' minds? You shouldn't take that into account, but some people will, won't they, Caleb?
Given the storylines behind him, that could work against him. And it is kind of interesting that you say that, because it would be, I mean, how many times does a Tennessee player who should have won the Heisman have to be a victim of certain politics within the sport during that time? Because as we all know, Peyton Manning was cost the Heisman because they didn't like the hype behind him during that year. And also there was a whole, you gave it to a quarterback the year before from the SEC. They didn't want to give it to 2 SEC quarterbacks 2 years in a row. There was the promotion of TV, which is why Paul Hornung won it over Johnny Majors, because Paul Hornung balled out for Notre Dame in a game that was on TV, which was rare in 1956. If that's held against Nico Iamaleava, that's disgraceful. I'll say this much. If Nico Iamaleava is cost the Heisman Trophy because of the old guard having a problem with him getting paid, if that cost him in 2024, he will still be at Tennessee in 2025. If he's a Heisman candidate in 2025, don't go to New York. Tennessee should fully withdraw and just say we're never going to send a player to. If you come to Tennessee, you should never go to New York for the Heisman. That's going to be their thing. Show up the Heisman the way. Remember when T.O. showed up the Hall of Fame where he just didn't show up because he was mad that it took them so long to put him in?
Yeah, he did a ceremony in Chattanooga. That was stupid.
Yeah, show up the
You
Heisman.
wouldn't really do that.
Show it up. I think so. I think you should.
If George McIntyre gets invited in 2027, you're going to send him. Come on, Caleb. It's
Don't
still
send them.
now.
Show them up. Embarrass them.
Travis is right. They need to revamp the Heisman voting process, and they do. But whether you like it or not, that's still a very prestigious award, and it still carries an awful lot of weight. That's why people are announced as Heisman Trophy winner blank. So it still means an awful lot. It would help you in recruiting down the road. It would help the publicity of your school. There's no way you're going to make a spectacle out of yourself.
Wait a minute.
That to me is Dion territory.
You would get publicity for your school, though, by doing this. And then they can lay out their case on how much of a scam the trophy is. And then the trophy would be humiliated. Guys, you can say what you want about Nico in terms of maybe he'll rub some people the wrong way because of the money. Tennessee is going to be the favorite program in college football the next 2 years. They are more than Dion in Colorado. I've told you guys this from a while. Josh Heupel has the most fun offense in all of college football to watch. Tennessee is the type of team, Dave, when you're flipping through the channels, and I know a lot of people don't flip through channels anymore. They go on Sling or they have streaming. But either way, when you're just looking through games to watch, you're a casual fan in like Seattle, just trying to watch some college football on a Saturday, you'll stop to watch Tennessee. They're that type of team over the next 2 years. And
I think that's probably the case. Now, I think that helps Nico. I think the Iowa game helped Nico a lot and get a little bit of that preseason pub. I think the pub will have more eyes watching that Chattanooga game than would be watching otherwise, whether that's NCAA pub, whether that's what he did against Iowa pub. But I do believe that there will be more eyeballs watching him one way or another. And he's going to ball out against Chattanooga. So if you have a problem with the process and not the player, I actually have a real problem with you. Let me support your argument in another way, Caleb. These quarterbacks are ready to hit the ground running. And Tennessee has been able to do that a couple of different seasons with Hendon Hooker. And Hendon Hooker went from backup to playing and played well. Would it surprise you to know that his quarterback rating compared to 2022 was actually 6 points higher in 2021, Caleb? So while the eye test would indicate Hooker was better in 2022, right?
Correct.
The numbers would actually indicate he's about the same or better.
Well, there is one factor you have to bring out into that, though, which is that
competition.
Well, not just competition, but two things. Cedric Tillman went down in 2023, or excuse me, in 2022. So he had to adjust on the fly. And also, more importantly than that, Hendon Hooker, I think his sacks were cut by 2/3. He had only a third. And so I say this with Aaron Rodgers a lot, and I've always criticized Aaron Rodgers for this, because it doesn't count against your quarterback rating when you get sacked. So a lot of quarterbacks that are selfish, like Aaron Rodgers, will take sacks rather than get rid of the ball because they know it won't count against them when they get sacked.
Well, I'm not sure how many people do that. I don't think Nico's going to do that.
No, but I'm saying Hendon Hooker took a lot more sacks in 2021 than in 2022. So while his quarterback rating went down,
well, my point
the
being
fact that he didn't take as many sacks shows that he improved so much.
Oh, I do know he improved. I'm not questioning that at all. I'm not trying to say he played better in 2021 than 2022. I just was rather impressed that the two numbers were comparable, because when I thought about it, I was doing the research. I really thought that he would be about 10, 15 points higher in 22 than 21. There needs to be a quarterback rating where you factor in rushing. Can we come up with that equation, Caleb?
That's what Total QBR does with ESPN. They do that with Total QBR. I just don't think they have Total QBR for college. So they factor in rushing. They also factor in when you they factor in when you completed a pass or made a play. Like if you did it in garbage time, it doesn't count in your favor as much as if you did it like on third down in the fourth quarter when your team is down by 5. Like they weigh the in-game situations of when you make a play. Also, it's so heavily analytical that I don't know the numbers, but it's the most important stat in football.
Our poll question stands at 50-50 exactly. And we're going to leave this one up for a little bit longer. I'm going to readdress this one because I do think there are going to be some Heisman voters that just don't like Nico because of what happened around him, not because of him personally. The poll question is, will Nico Iamaleava be a Heisman contender this year? Yes, at 50%. No, 2025 is his year at 50% as well. I'm not sure that Tennessee won't have a better roster around Nico this season than next. I think they're going to hit a little bit of a talent gap in 2025, but this roster is pretty set with an intact offensive line and a good group of receivers. He won't have the same group in 2025, so you really don't know.
Yeah, I've said that for a while. I've said Heupel went all in on 2024 to try to win a national title, and I still stand by that. Well, it kind of reminds me of, Dave, you've seen NFL teams right in the past, or maybe even NBA and baseball teams where they load up on free agents for 1 year, and it's a lot of bad contracts that are back end loaded that they know is going to mess them up for a long period of time, but they're just taking that chance to win that title for that 1 year. Yeah. And it feels like Tennessee is doing that. Now, the difference is, and you and I know the difference, with the transfer portal and NIL, Tennessee can, if it doesn't happen this year, they can just reload next year through the transfer portal, obviously. But
they could have 5 superstars in 2025 that we don't even know their names right now.
Exactly. So I think because of that, it's not the same. But I do think Heupel's all in on this year, and where he's really putting his chips on the table is if he doesn't deliver this year, and I mean doesn't deliver in a big way, at least have Tennessee down into the semifinals, Final Four. I think it'll start to be hard for him to recruit, because I don't think he'll be as sexy of a guy I don't think his offense and his team will be as sexy to play for after that, because there will be concerns. He will start to look more like Gus Malzahn his last few years at Auburn.
Mead Drinker said, will Nico's first year be more comparable to Hooker's first or second year? Wow. I'll let you go first on that one.
Hooker's second year. And I'll tell you, because again, Nico right now has the same experience in the system that Hooker had entering his second year. Hooker just started his first year in the system. Nico didn't. And so, yeah, no, Hooker's second year. And also, and here's the big one, and this is one part of the sacks thing that I got to bring up. A lot of that was on Hooker. He held the ball too long in 2021. But the other part was Cooper Mays wasn't healthy through a lot of 2021. He was fully healthy in 2022. That was a huge difference in the drop in sacks. And so Cooper is healthy all of this year. Again, Nico is going to be in great shape. And also, I have to say this. This is going to be the crazy part. Dave, I actually think Nico's a little bit more decisive than even Hendon Hooker. I watched him in the Iowa game.
Well,
he was very decisive.
Well, you stole my thunder.
I'm sorry.
I think he is more decisive. I think he gets the ball out quicker. I've seen that with my own eyeballs than Hooker was in 2021. I think he has a faster release just physically, not just reading defenses, but a faster release as a whole. So I think he'll be more like 2022 than 2021. But there are going to be some times, I mean, these are big-time defensive coordinators in the SEC, right? There are going to be some times where they throw different looks at him. He is going to have those moments where he's a bit frozen in the pocket. He's not going to be perfect the entire year.
Maybe that's one of the things. I think that's one of the things that could help him about being a first-year starter. Those defensive coordinators don't always figure you out your first year starting. I mean, let's be honest, Dave. Let's just call it what it is. Johnny Manziel wasn't as good in 2013 as he was in 2012. And honestly, Jameis Winston wasn't as good in 2014 as he was in 2013. And when you talk about these first-year starters, Caleb Williams wasn't as good in 2023 as he was in 2022. Now, they all were still great their second year. I'm not they were still pretty darn good. But there was a bit of a regression. And what I gathered in all of those situations was defensive coordinators adjusted and they didn't change their style of play that much. And those quarterbacks.
Let me ask you this, because it was brought up by Mead Drinker, I believe, and that was who, as far as Nico, when do you think he'll look like a veteran?
Immediately.
September?
Immediately.
September?
Immediately. Yes.
I do. I think you will too, because of the way the schedule sets out. But the other question he said, I believe it was actually Travis. Needs to be revamped. The Heisman Trophy needs to be revamped. How would you revamp the Heisman voting process? I'll ask you that question, Caleb. Brought to you by Don Self, State Farm. Customer service still matters. For 40 years, they built their business on taking care of their customers. That's Don Self. DonSelf.net, DonSelf.net. Just call 423-396-2126, 423-396-2126. Customer service still matters when you need that claim filled. It's not just about shopping for price. How would you revamp the Heisman voting if I made you the king of college football?
Well, it's a little tricky for me now because the college football playoff is going to be so close to what I would have done that I can't do this anymore. But since the theory of the Heisman is you take the conference championship games into account, but not the bowl season, that's fine. I'm okay with that. I'm not mailing ballots out. And Dave, this is going to be crazy. I'm not even mailing the ballots out until the Monday after the conference championship games, because that way you have to watch those games and take them into account if you want to vote. And then that way you can't send them in until it's over. And I mail them out Monday, and you got a week, and you got a week to send them back in.
I got no problem with that. I mean, it takes me roughly 3 or 4 hours sometimes if I really want to go through and dig into it, but not having the conference championship games is bizarre. But there are some people that send their votes in early November just to make sure that they get their vote for the next year. They don't want to forget about it. Then there are people like me who take it a lot more seriously.
Peyton Manning was cost the Heisman for a big reason, because voters during that time did not want to reward teams who played conference title games, because, as you know, Dave, many conferences didn't have conference title games.
But the biggest factor in Peyton was ESPN. I mean, ESPN tried to make that a television show. That was the biggest factor. They pushed a Big Ten player every single week.
You know what was crazy about that? What was so crazy about that was there were other candidates in that class they could have pushed outside of just Charles Woodson, because Randy Moss was in that class, Chad Pennington was in that class, and Ryan Leaf was in that class. And
no offense to Chad, who's a friend of mine, but Heisman Trophy winner Chad Pennington doesn't sound exactly right.
No, I agree, but okay, Randy Moss, Peyton Manning, Charles Woodson, all three are Hall of Famers. I think Charles Woodson's the worst of the three, though, right? In terms of the NFL, in terms of if you rank where they stand in their production at their position. Because Randy Moss, I don't care what anybody says, Randy Moss is the most physically talented wide receiver in the history of football.
Well, yes, but you did just pick the two most elite players at their position in my generation. So, yes, he was the third best player among those guys, but he was one of the best corners of my generation as well.
Charles Woodson was amazing. I'm just saying the fact that he beat those two out for the Heisman when Peyton and Randy Moss were actually better. I mean, if you want to put Randy Moss in there, they just didn't want to put Marshall. They just didn't want to prop up Marshall. There's an anti-Marshall bias.
The bottom line is they wanted ratings on a TV show, and they thought they could manipulate the voting to make it close, and they made it too close. The underdog won.